This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha, one of your favorite channels on YouTube. I'm back at you this week with another great video story, and you can see the title right on your screen. Newlywed wife hooked up with her ex, so I left town and never went back. Now, let's get into this story and see what it's all about. What I'm about to discuss happened to me exactly 6 years ago this month. He says it was May. Whenever the day comes up on the calendar, I dread it. Every year around this time, I start getting flashbacks, and it's a real downer for me. On the morning of D-Day, my life was at an all-time high, but by midnight, I had sunk to my lowest point. I was a defeated man who felt as if his life was over. I'll now explain how everything began between me and my ex. I was a junior in college when I met the woman who, 15 months later, I would make my wife. Are you kidding me? You're still in college, and you meet this woman, and then 15 months later, you're marrying her? What could go wrong? For this, I'll call her Vicky and call myself Anthony. Like me, Vicky was a junior, and we met while studying at the campus library. We immediately hit it off, and I knew right away something big was in store for us. We kissed on our second date, but things didn't progress to third base until we had been dating for 3 weeks, and we didn't go all the way until 5 weeks after that, so this guy waited almost 2 months to get the good stuff, which, as you know, is very unusual in today's modern society. Prior to getting together, we each had just one previous partner. Are you sure about that? I had a brief but passionate relationship with a woman when I was 18, while Vicky had a serious relationship with a guy that lasted over 5 years. Now, I put up a yellow sign here just to say caution. This woman is only, 21? Maybe she's 22 years old, and she's been in a relationship prior to meeting you with a guy for 5 years. Oh, that's a dangerous situation there, because that guy, I'm sure, imprinted on her. He says, keep this in mind for later. In my previous relationship, we both were each other's first, and we dated about 6 months before drifting apart. She was a partier who liked to drink and smoke grass, and I just wasn't into that lifestyle. As for Vicky, her relationship was quite serious, and she and her then boyfriend were on their way to getting married before she discovered he had been cheating on her when she was at college. Not only that, the girl he was cheating on her with got pregnant, and he broke up with Vicky and married his pregnant AP. I was the first guy she dated after that relationship ended. I guess you could say I was her rebound lover. Whatever the situation that brought us together, we fell deeply in love, and I quickly envisioned our future together and wanted to take the next step. So, after dating for just 7 months, I asked Vicky to marry me, and she said yes. Of course, that's a big mistake. My parents lost their mind when I told them. My dad specifically told me we were too young and didn't even have jobs yet. Yes, Dad, you nailed it. I promised my parents we would not get married until after we both graduated and found work. This calmed them down a bit, but they still tried to dissuade me right up to our wedding day. After that, they just went along with it and accepted that this thing was going to happen against their wishes. I kept my promise to my parents, and we didn't set the wedding date until we both had jobs. As for Vicky's parents, they were all for us getting married. They saw me as a great guy and totally different than the guy Vicky dated before. So, this guy she dated before, what I'm reading into this, was likely a bad boy. When it came time for planning the wedding, they paid for everything, including our honeymoon in the Bahamas. When it came to my job choice, Dad wasn't happy with me here either. Instead of taking a job paying more money in the metro area, where I grew up, I accepted a job 230 miles away in a rural community near Vicky's hometown. So, this guy is following this woman, and this is something you don't want to do as a man. The job didn't pay as well, but Vicky had already secured a job in her field in her hometown, so I thought this was a good compromise. My dad explained to me when it comes to his vocation, a man shouldn't compromise. He said it was never good for a man to follow a woman. It should be the other way around. He said if a woman truly loves a man, she will follow him to the end of the earth. His dad sounds like a strong man with traditional values. I told Dad things are different today than when he and Mom grew up, explaining women are viewed as equals when it comes to careers and working. Again here, my parents were disappointed but accepted that I was now an adult making my own decisions. The wedding day came, and it was great. We were married in the church Vicky's family attended and had a big reception afterwards. There were over 180 people there, of which about 40 consisted of my family and friends, and the rest were Vicky's people. After we got back from our honeymoon, we settled into our jobs and things were going well. We moved into a newly built two-bedroom apartment in Vicky's hometown and spent the next few weeks furnishing and decorating it like we wanted. Vicky's job was less than a half mile from our apartment, and some days she would walk to work, while mine was 16 miles away. The drive was a straight shot and only took about 25 minutes, 30 tops, so I didn't mind it. In fact, I liked the drive as it gave me time to unwind before getting home. Since I didn't have friends there, my whole world centered around Vicky, my job, and her family and friends. Now that is a big mistake, as we've talked about in other videos, because as you can see, this guy is building his whole world around this woman, and you don't want to do that. That didn't bother me though, as I was busy working 60 hours a week and I really liked Vicky's family and her friends. They're all good people and I don't have one negative thing to say about any of them even today. Every month Vicky and her closest friends would meet for dinner and talk. On these nights, she'd get home by 7:30 or 8 at the latest. He says, hold this thought for later too. These were her girls' nights, but not the typical kind we guys think about. Instead, these ladies actually met to eat and talk, nothing else. At about the 9-month mark of our marriage, things were going well, and we decided it was time to start a family. Vicky went off birth control, and we amped up things in the bedroom using techniques we read about to help increase the chances of conceiving. A couple months went by and no baby yet, but we were sure having fun trying. I imagine you're probably reading what I've written so far thinking this guy's life sounds pretty good. Well, it was right up to D-Day. I'll now skip forward to that day. It was a Wednesday and Vicky and 3 of her girlfriends planned to meet up at a local restaurant for their monthly get-together. They met after work and I stopped by the restaurant on my way home to talk with them a bit and to pick up the takeout order Vicky placed for me. It was an Italian place that made my favorite lasagna and homemade Italian bread. After leaving the restaurant, I went straight home and devoured the food. It was great as always. Shortly after I finished eating, I got a call from Vicky. What does she want, I wonder? She said after dinner, she and her friends were going to go to one of her friends' homes to continue talking if that was all right. I said, sure, I'll see you when you get here. She told me she'd be home around 9 o'clock or so. I said, okay. We said our I love yous and ended the call. After that, I plopped on the couch to relax and turned on the TV. Being exhausted from work and with a belly full of carbs, I dozed off and didn't wake up until a couple hours later after having a bizarre nightmare. In this dream, Vicky and I were driving down a mountainous road with lots of twists and turns when she asked me to stop the car. When I did, she got out of the car and walked over to the edge of the road. When she got to the edge, she turned around, looked at me with a strange grin and said, "Goodbye, Anthony." I tried getting out of the car and going to her, but it felt like I was locked in the driver's seat and couldn't move. The seat and shoulder belts felt like they weighed 500 pounds and I couldn't budge them. When I looked up again, she was gone. I screamed no and then woke up. When I did, I found myself slumped on the couch staring at the TV. I realized it was all just a bad dream, but it really freaked me out. I then noticed it was after 9:30 and Vicky still wasn't home. At that point, I thought her get-together must have run over a bit. I decided to call her though just to hear her voice and to tell her about the crazy dream I just had. I dialed and the call went straight to voicemail. I waited 15 minutes and called again and got the same. I also texted her a couple times and got no reply. I then started to worry. Vicky never turned off her phone and was never late for anything. She'd also text me multiple times when she was out, but that night I hadn't heard from her since she called me to say she'd be a little late. I decided next to call her best friend, who I'll call Lori. Lori is a nice woman and I've become good friends with her and her husband. I called Lori and she answered. I told her I was trying to get in touch with Vicky but couldn't reach her. I said I was just calling to check how much longer they were going to be. Lori was silent for a moment and then asked, "What do you mean?" After I explained, Lori said she knew nothing about an after-dinner get-together and that everyone left the restaurant around 7:30. Hearing this, my heart sunk and I started to panic. I thought something terrible may have happened to Vicky and the dream I had was some sort of omen. Lori said let me try to call her. She put me on hold a few minutes and came back and said she was getting her voicemail too. Lori then said she was going to call around to the other ladies who were at the dinner to see if they knew anything and call me back. After I got off the phone with Lori, I called Vicky's mom and asked if she was there. She said no and inquired as to why. I thought she was. I told her, and like me, she panicked and called out to her husband and handed him the phone. I then explained the same to him. While he and I were talking, Vicky's mom tried calling her, but the calls were still going to voicemail. Not knowing what else to do, I told them I was going to get in my car and drive around to see if I could locate her car. The town is not that big, so I thought there was a good chance I'd locate her. Her dad said he and my mother-in-law would do the same, as we were all very worried at that point. I first drove down the main street and by the restaurant, but didn't see anything. I then headed over to the shopping center, which has a couple bars and restaurants that stay open later, but again, nothing. While I was driving around, I got a call from Lori. She said she talked to everyone who was at the dinner and they hadn't seen or talked to Vicky since leaving the restaurant. I wonder where she is. After frantically driving around for about 30 minutes, I spotted Vicky's car on a residential side street. I pulled in behind it and called Vicky's parents and then called Lori, and they all came right over to join me. Lori arrived first and I asked her if she knew anyone on this street. Before she had a chance to answer, Vicky's parents turned down the street and drove past us as I waved to them. They drove further up the street and pulled over in front of a house. They got out and headed right up to the front door. I started to walk towards the house when Lori grabbed me by the shirt and told me to wait a minute. As I turned to face her, I could hear my in-laws knocking on the door and yelling at someone to open up. Lori had a sad look on her face and told me she knew who lived there. She paused and told me the house belonged to Vicky's ex-boyfriend. I'll call him Ron. She said he and his wife and young daughter live there. At first it didn't register with me, but then I quickly realized the implication. Vicky was cheating on me. With that, Lori and I walked towards the house, and while we were still about 20 yards away, the front porch light came on and I saw a man open the screen door. My father-in-law was yelling at him and trying to move past him into the house with my mother-in-law right behind him screaming at the guy. They were both very loud, and one of the neighbors came running over from across the street to see what was going on. The next thing I saw was Vicky moving past the guy and onto the porch. Her parents shouted at her asking how could she do such a thing. Vicky then looked over and saw me and Lori. She called out my name and started running towards me. I was on the verge of breaking down and didn't know what else to do, so I sprinted to my car and drove away. My adrenaline was so high I can't describe the feeling, and I was really in shock. I just started driving around town like a zombie with no destination in mind, and my phone started ringing. After driving about 10 minutes, I found myself at the exit ramp for the interstate out on the edge of town. I was going to make a U-turn and head back home, but instead decided to get on the highway and drive a while longer to clear my head. Before I knew it, I had driven for an hour and was nearly 70 miles away. I got off the highway to use the bathroom and planned to turn around and go home. When I got back in my car, I turned out of the parking lot and made a last-minute decision to keep driving west instead of going back home. I was still in a bad place and in no condition to talk to anyone. I ended up driving another 2 hours to the outskirts of a major city. By this time, it was nearly 3 a.m. and I was mentally and physically exhausted, so I pulled into a truck stop and fell asleep in my car. I was awoken by voices a few hours later as 2 truckers walked by my car into the store. At first, I forgot where I was and what happened last night, but then quickly remembered. I again had to use the restroom, so I went back into the store and got a large coffee before getting back in my car. I checked my messages and, as expected, I had multiple calls and texts from Vicky, her parents, and even Lori. Instead of calling one of them, I first called my boss and told him what I was dealing with and asked for a few days off. He told me to feel free to use all my PTO, my paid time off, if I needed to, and to keep him posted. I next called my parents to tell them. They were disgusted and concerned about my well-being. My dad then said, "We tried to tell you, but you wouldn't listen." He said, "You need to divorce the B now." See, dad's not playing around, and this guy should have been listening to his dad from day one, but he didn't. After I finished talking to my parents, I texted Vicky's dad and told him I had left town for a while, but I was okay. He texted me back and said he was glad I was safe and to call him when I got the chance. I responded telling him I would, but it may take a few days as I just wasn't up to it. I then listened and read all the messages Vicky left me. The messages and her texts confirmed she cheated. All the messages were of her apologizing and saying she made a terrible mistake and it's something she'll never do again. As I listened and read all the messages, each one became progressively more desperate. This gave me some sort of twisted pleasure, I have to admit. At the moment, she went from the person I love most in the world to someone I hated, I mean really hated. I called my parents back and told them I was going to stay in the city, where I was for a few days. They asked me to come to their place. I told them I needed to be alone to think things through but would keep in touch. I assured them I was fine and not to worry. I said I was in no danger of doing something stupid. I then spent the next 2 days exploring the city and thinking about my next steps. By the end of the second day, I had made 3 key life decisions. First, I decided I wanted to divorce Vicky. Second, I didn't want to see or speak to her ever again if I could avoid it. And third, I didn't want to ever set foot in that town again. I first had to address my job situation before doing anything else. I called my boss and told him of my plans and asked if there was an opportunity for me to transfer. I explained that if not, I would be submitting my notice as I didn't want to go anywhere near the town where my wife lived. He understood my dilemma and came up with an idea. He explained that the store manager for one of our urban stores had just been terminated. He said he'd love to have me take over the store and turn it around. Without hesitation, I told him I'd take the job. He told me before accepting the position, I should first go there to check it out. I agreed and drove the 3 hours to the location and checked into a nearby hotel. That evening, I went to a mall and bought myself several $100s worth of clothes and proper shoes. As I left town, that fateful night was just the clothes on my back. I then went back and washed all the clothes at the hotel laundry. The next morning, I went out to explore the community where the store was located. It was a rough neighborhood. I mean really rough. I checked the crime stats for the area, and they were off the charts bad. After driving around a while, I parked in the store parking lot and just watched customers going in and out. I then went into the store to check things out. I noticed the employees were all very nice, but in desperate need of training. I went back to my car and thought about it. I decided to take the job and called my boss to tell him. That afternoon, we completed the paperwork and 3 days later, I started working at the store. That night, I called my parents and told them my plans and they were immediately against it. My dad suggested I put in my notice and come back home and get a job there. He said there were hundreds of openings throughout the metro area offering better pay that were in safe neighborhoods. I told my dad I understood his concern but said I wanted to stay with the company and working for my boss as I've been treated very well since the day I started. The following day, I called several attorneys back in the county where Vicky lived. I selected one and paid the $1,500 retainer fee on my credit card. I also gave him my wife's contact information. I told him I didn't want to speak to her again and asked that he call to inform her of my intentions. Vicky had been trying to reach me nonstop since I left, but I never responded. That's smart because, like I've said over and over, going no contact is the best way to handle these situations. My attorney called her right after he got off the phone with me, then called me back after he spoke with her. He said she was hysterical and said she didn't want a divorce and just wanted to speak with me. He said he finished the call by suggesting she secure legal counsel and advised her that all communications were to go through him. He said she screamed no and hung up on him. After I spoke with the attorney, I called Vicky's dad and explained to him my decision. I told him I had relocated to another state over 400 miles away and was in the process of filing for divorce. He paused for a moment and was silent, but then spoke up in a broken voice and said he was disappointed and sad. He explained he wasn't disappointed with me, but he was disappointed and ashamed of his daughter. Her dad actually told me that he and his wife selfishly would like me to stay married to Vicky, but said I was doing the right thing by divorcing her. Now that's unusual for a girl's dad to side with the guy, but in this case this guy did, so I give him a thumbs up for that. He told me to do what I needed to do and to not worry. He said they would make sure Vicky is cared for. He then asked if I wanted him to arrange to have my clothing and furniture shipped somewhere. I told him no, stating I didn't want anything from the apartment. I then told him I would pay the final 2 months' rent on the lease, and he told me to forget about it and that Vicky would pay. He said it was the least she could do for me after what she'd done. I thanked him, and for the first time I broke down. I thanked him for being so good to me as a foolish young man who stole his daughter away. He told me I was the best thing that ever happened to her. He said she realizes that now, but it's too late. He wished me well and told me to keep in touch. That was the last time I spoke with anyone from Vicky's family until I had to go back 7 months later for the hearing. I was hoping to not have to appear in person, but my attorney said I had to since Vicky didn't voluntarily agree to our terms. It's not that she was looking to get anything from me financially, she was just holding out trying to get me back. Right up to the morning of the hearing, Vicky left me voicemail messages and sent me texts begging for a second chance. She even sent me 3 handwritten letters. I never responded to any of them. While I initially had deep hatred towards her at the hearing, I just felt pity for her. I wanted to avoid seeing Vicky and her family before the hearing, so my attorney and I walked in with just 5 minutes to spare. Vicky looked at me with tears in her eyes and waved. I just nodded my head. During the hearing, her attorney told the judge that it was his client's wish that they attend counseling, as the only thing she wanted to do was to reconcile and continue on with the marriage. My attorney had warned me this was a possible risk. However, to our surprise, the judge said that it was obvious that I wasn't interested in reconciliation as I had moved out of state. To confirm, he asked my attorney, and my attorney said, "That is correct, Your Honor." He told the judge I had moved out of state and started a new job. He said my only ask of the court was to finalize the divorce equitably. Since the state has at-fault divorce laws and Vicky acknowledged her infidelity, the hearing was quick and the divorce was made final. After the hearing, I spoke to Vicky in the presence of my attorney. She was crying and told me she was sorry and came in for a hug. Though I didn't want to, I hugged her and told her I wish her and her parents nothing but the best. I then embraced her parents and left. That was it. The marriage and life that once had so much promise ended nearly as quickly as it began. It's now 6 years later, and while I'm still single, I've been in a committed relationship with a great girl for the past 2 years. Neither of us are high on marriage, but we do plan to stay together forever and want to have kids in the near future. When that happens, we'll move in together, so they're still not even living with each other. As for Vicky, last I heard, she now lives with a divorced guy who has several adult children. From what I was told, he's in his early 50s and used to be a neighbor of hers when she grew up. Apparently her parents aren't happy about it, as Vicky was friends with this guy's oldest daughter when they were growing up. Because of this, her relationship with her parents has become further strained. How do I know all this? Lori told me. I've remained friends with Lori and her husband, and we're connected on Facebook. About a year ago, she and her husband were in my area and my girlfriend and I met them for dinner. Lori also told me that Vicky's old boyfriend, the one she cheated on me with, is still with his wife, but they both cheat on each other. Once a cheater, always a cheater, as they say. She said they split up for a year, during which time his wife had a baby with another guy and he and Vicky dated on and off for a while. Oh my goodness. The guy and his wife have since reconciled and had another child. The OP says, what a bunch of sick, dysfunctional people. I'm so glad I got out of that situation when I did, or I'd still be a part of that mess. He says, be careful out there, gentlemen. And that's the end of his story, and I thought it was a great story. Now he made a lot of mistakes right up front. He rushed right into marriage. He married young. He followed his woman to her hometown, which is a big mistake, but I have to hand it to the guy. Once he found out she was cheating on him, he got out of town and left her like Speed Racer Man. He got out of there so fast she didn't even get a chance to explain herself. And then he immediately filed for divorce. So I think he handled that like a boss. And now I want to cover what I think are the morals of the story. The first one, alpha widows are not relationship material and definitely not marriage material. An alpha widow, like I said up front, is somebody who has been imprinted on by a strong male, and typically those males have broken up with them for some reason. And those women never get over those guys. So, when you're dealing with women like that, you gotta tread very lightly, guys. Next, rushing into marriage at any age, especially when you are young, is a very risky proposition that goes without saying. Next, a man should never follow a woman. A woman should always follow a man. Now, if I got women out there today listening to me, I know that's going to be controversial, but I'm telling you guys, it never seems to work out well when a guy follows his woman. Next, when cheating happens, just end it. I've said this over and over, and I'll keep saying it in every video. Do not try to rebuild a relationship or try again. It just never works. Next, no contact is always the best approach, and you saw that very clearly in this story. Next, living a great life is the best possible revenge, because I guarantee this Vicky is still following what this guy is doing, and she's probably seeing, wow, this guy is doing well in his career. Oh man, he's got a new hot girlfriend, and that could have been me. We could have been building our family now. We could have been getting on with our lives and living a great life, and here I am now living with this 50-year-old divorcee who's got 3 adult children. I mean, she can't be happy. And then finally, marriage is not necessary in order to have a successful relationship or a family. Many men think you have to get married in order to have a successful relationship and build a family. You don't. However, you still need to be cautious with that and plan everything out and make sure everything is specified before you jump into any kind of relationship like that. But you can have a successful relationship and build a family without getting married. So those are my thoughts, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? How do you think this guy handled it? Would you have done something different? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's story is one you won't want to miss. My girlfriend, 36, admittedly had a thing for older men. I, 49, was surprised she came onto me at a bar one night after I'd worked all day at my construction job. We started talking, and I couldn't help but see the good in her that she wanted me to see. She had a son who was 16 at the time. His father left them suddenly when he was just 9 years old, so he had very little faith in any man to become his father figure. I fell for this boy because I, too, grew up without my father. I wanted to be there for him, even before I met him. My girlfriend and I started dating, so shortly after that, I met her son, Chris. He was definitely resistant to getting to know me, but wouldn't tell me why right away. After 1 year of failed attempts at bonding, he finally told me I wasn't going to be around long enough for him to trust me. I told him I didn't intend on leaving and wanted to be someone he could look up to. I didn't tell him, but I really loved his mom already. Then he told me it wouldn't be my fault when our relationship ended. I was confused. I asked him what he meant, and he said his mom had 5 boyfriends since his dad left. I was surprised, but still not completely deterred. Maybe those men weren't suitable to be a father example. Now I realize I was just defending the woman I fell for, without knowing her all too well. I decided to talk with my girlfriend about it. She came off as defensive, reminding me that she said her son didn't trust any man. When I told her he said it wouldn't be my fault, she didn't have a response for that. A part of me could tell she was plain dumb and just blaming her ex for her son's fears, even though that might not be why. I decided to stick around, believing I could prove this negative premonition wrong. Honestly, I cared for her and her boy so much, sometimes I wonder if my heart is too big. Chris and I did manage to have several deep talks and bond with each other. I took him wherever he wanted to go and gave him honest answers I would have craved as a teenager without my father. Then, one day, everything came to a screeching halt. Chris barged into the house crying and yelling for me, followed by his confused mother. He quickly told me that what he warned me about had happened. Before his mother could interrupt or have any idea what he was going to say, he said he saw his mother having sex with his teacher. Then he added, this is what he warned me about 2.5 years ago. His mother, and I gasped. He continued by saying she thought he was going to his friend's house after the parent-teacher conference, but he felt like he needed to stay for some reason. He waited in the car for her to come out. When she didn't come out of the school, he went back in and peeked through the skinny window in the door of his classroom. Even though they turned off the lights to make it dark, he saw them in the corner of the room. My would-be stepson then said, now that I knew the truth, I could kick them out. He was used to it and said he didn't need me or her. He went upstairs to pack, and his mom stepped in to quietly tell me he didn't see what he thought he saw. Her face was red, and she just looked desperate for me to believe her lies. She started crying, and I didn't say anything and just stared at her. She told me again that it wasn't true, but her son heard her and asked if she was calling him a liar. She screamed that this was adult business, and it was none of his concern. He screamed that it was his concern, because she was taking away any chance he had to find a father or a home. I said her son is telling me he saw something that would make him have to leave me and his home. I'm likely to believe him over her. Her son then said I should trust him, because he would never want to marry a woman like his mother. She screamed when she heard him say that. She was just beside herself, collapsed onto the floor. I told her she needed to get out of my house, and we were done. I wished her luck finding another place to live. I went upstairs and told Chris that if he ever needed to come to my house, my door would be open. He also had my phone number. He was about to be 18, so if he sought my company, his mother wouldn't be able to do anything about it. They left in a packed car, and she found them a new place to stay, but it was with a creepy stranger. When Chris turned 18, he moved in with me. It was an incredibly happy day for us, but not so much my ex. She hated it. She tried to say it couldn't happen, but it most definitely could and did. I acted as his father and continue to while he lives on campus. It's a relief that neither of us depend on his mother. He still keeps in touch with her, but he's learned to keep his distance emotionally after all the instability she put him through. I guess karma hits hard though. After Chris moved in with me, she was diagnosed with an STD that is hard to ignore or manage. She also had another baby at the age of 41. I'm pretty sure she doesn't know who the father is. Speaking of that, per Christopher's request, we submitted a complaint to the school board about the teacher that slept with his mom. Our letter was taken very seriously by them, so the teacher was fired immediately. They asked Chris if there was anything else they could do, but he was happy with that. I didn't care what his mom was up to anymore, because she wasn't much of a loss. I was glad I got to keep Chris in my life though, so maybe everything happens for a reason. Oh, B, you might have a point there. Everything could happen for a reason. Maybe our only obligation in life is to take what we can learn from experiences. Life is a balance of caring for ourselves and others. Some people honestly don't deserve our love, because by trying to love them, we would only be sacrificing ourselves. Never allow something or someone to stay in your life if it's discouraging you. Communication allows for relationships to prosper, but if a person lies and cheats without regard to their spouse, they are communicating that they don't value them. Find someone else and never look back. This woman's actions, especially as a mother, were despicable. I am so glad you and Chris worked together to free yourselves from her. She'll never be able to maintain healthy relationships if she doesn't change. I wish you and Chris the best of luck in life. Thank you for sharing this story. Now, let's get into our second story for today. At the time of this story, I was a private investigator for 20 years. I'd been divorced once and really just wanted to meet someone to love and retire with. When I met my girlfriend one random night at a bar after work, I thought I started falling for her too fast. I kept reminding myself to take it slow and made sure this is the woman I want to be with, because if heartbreak can be avoided, it should be. The problem was she was also moving too fast. She said she lived with her parents and they had a good relationship, which made me wonder why she wanted to start sleeping over for several nights in a row. She said it was because she was head over heels for me and I felt the same about her, so it was hard to argue. While she slept over one night, she asked me if the security cameras in my home recorded all the time. I laughed and told her they haven't worked since day one. I just went to all that trouble to get them up there, that I never felt like taking them down. This was actually a lie. The cameras did work and recorded all the time, but her question made me nervous. After all, I was a private investigator, and if there was anything she tried to get past me, I was going to find out. It was probably just a month after that I gave her a key to my apartment. I told her I didn't want her there unless I was there, after work or on days off. She agreed right away and was really happy I trusted her with my key. The next day, I was at work and the cameras caught her in my home. She looked around sheepishly, but eventually started getting food out of the fridge and watching television. She looked so happy and cute, even though I was kind of upset that she completely disregarded what I said. I decided to watch her for a while longer without telling her I could see what she was doing. Before I knew it, we'd been together for 2 years. During that time, I'd watch her at the apartment without her knowing. She was adorable, but she did start acting funny. By now, she had moved in. After being together for just a short time on the grand scale of things, she started to get short with me. I did my best to stay on good terms, but it was becoming difficult. It was while I was having doubts that her sister randomly called me on Facebook. She was known for starting drama, so I was hesitant to answer, but I'm glad I did. She warned me that her sister might take advantage of me. I asked why, and she said it's because she can change her mind suddenly. She added that my girlfriend never lived at their parents' house as an adult, and they didn't have a good relationship. When she met me, my girlfriend was sleeping wherever she could, mostly her car or a friend's house. This was a little unsettling, but even with her acting funny, I reminded myself that her sister could just be starting drama, so I did not need to break up with my girlfriend. I thought we could work through this, or whatever happened in her past. I knew she didn't want to break up, because otherwise she would have just left me, right? Wrong. Instead of breaking up and losing her place to live, she found it easier to go behind my back. At work, I got a notification for the camera. I actually didn't mean to click on the notification, but my giant thumb did. The app opened as I tried to close it, but then I saw my girlfriend bringing another man into the apartment. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but I still left for home right away. I walked in on them trying to hide. I pulled AP out of the closet I saw him go in, while she put on her panties. He ran for it and apologized to me. My girlfriend was just sobbing and said that he was just supposed to give her a nude massage, but nothing else. I told her to quit it. I knew she didn't think she'd be caught, but the cameras worked the entire time she lived here. Her jaw dropped, and she actually tried to blame me for lying to her. I told her she was stupid and cruel for doing this, and I wanted her out of my house. She begged me for another chance, and admitted she was wrong for blaming me at all. I told her I still didn't believe she knew how serious this was. I would never be able to trust her again, and I should listen to her sister's advice right away. My girlfriend assumed I would never find out about this. It's thanks to my cleverness and a little bit of luck that I did. I told her again to get out, and she did, because she ruined it. I wanted to share this story for other men, or anyone going through this betrayal. It's exhausting, but it's not impossible to get through this. Just stay persistent, and remember what you need to do for yourself. Since all of this happened, I have married a different woman, and we've been together for 13 years. Turns out there was a reason I didn't ever feel ready to propose to my ex-girlfriend. I was meant to find the next woman. Opie, I am so sorry your girlfriend tricked you into wasting time with her. I am so glad you accidentally opened the app and saw what she was doing. As an investigator, you must have luck on your side. Your girlfriend was unfathomably stupid for bringing a man to your home after you supported and loved her. I have little faith in her ability to compromise or communicate in a relationship between two mature people. I am so relieved you got out of this and found the opportunity to meet your wife. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. My wife, 41, and I, 43 male, have been married for 5 years, and we both have kids from previous relationships. I have 2 sons, 20 and 18. The oldest is in college, and my youngest will start college this coming fall. My wife has 3 kids, 21, 19, and a teen. Her 2 oldest are also in college, and I'm sure her youngest will attend college as well. My wife and I mostly share our finances regarding shared expenses, but college expenses have always been kept separate. My ex-wife and I started 529 college plans for our kids when they were younger, so they both have a fair amount available to them. My stepkids have had to take out loans to pay for their college because my current wife and her ex couldn't save much to help them. This has caused some animosity between my wife and because she sees this as me not treating my stepkids the same as my bio kids. We've always tried to treat all the kids the same, but obviously this sets them on uneven grounds regarding student debt and by a large margin. This issue has been compounded recently after I got a large chunk of money via inheritance. This money was willed only to me. I used quite a bit to pay off a car loan and credit card debt. I also invested some of it. I planned on giving the remaining to my sons after they graduate college as kind of a starter fund to do whatever they want. I figure they can use it to pay off any remaining debt, make a down payment for a house or car, travel, invest, or whatever they want. I've not told my sons about this plan yet. My wife is upset with me for not giving any of this inherited money to my stepkids. She said that since my kids already have money saved for college, I should help my stepkids out so that it evens the playing field between them a bit. She thinks I'm playing favorites with my kids and setting them up for more success than her kids. She wants me to use all the money I plan to give my sons as a starter fund and distribute it equally amongst her 3 kids and not give my sons any. I shot that idea down immediately, and she countered by at least giving all 5 of the kids in equal amounts so no one could claim favoritism. I shot that idea down as well because, well, it wasn't my stepkid's relative that died. This is money that I inherited, and I feel I get to decide what I want to do with it. I already used a substantial amount to help with debt that my and I share and also invested in our future together. I understand my wife is upset that her kids are being saddled with thousands in student debt, but her inability to save before I even met her is not really my problem to solve. I can kind of understand her view that I'm playing favorites with my kids over hers, but I would never behave the way she is if our roles were reversed. She thinks I'm being an idiot about this and is threatening to tell her kids that I'm planning to give my sons thousands of dollars while they get nothing. Edit. When we got married, my wife was receiving child support from her ex while I was paying child support to my ex. She always ensured that the money she got from her ex was all spent on her kids, which it should have been. We kind of had an unspoken agreement that money for our kids was separate from other shared family expenses. Her ex is involved, and he's a good guy. He never missed a single child support payment, and he's a good, loving father, but he works a blue-collar job, and it's not exactly enough to pay for college for 3 kids. You are the idiot. I'm planning to give my sons thousands of dollars while stepkids get nothing. That, my dude, is exactly what you're planning to do. You're setting yourself up for so much resentment and stress and arguments. The times are hard for young people. Between student loans, inflation, and a housing crisis, I totally get why your wife wants you to help. Are you really unable to find some sort of middle ground on that? Think of his kids and how they might feel knowing that instead of being set up after college, dad had to spend money on stepbrothers so stepmom wouldn't freak out. This is why I would never get remarried. Your remarriage has the potential to screw your kids financially, and that's really a shame. She should have saved for her kids. She made sure that they were covered when she got child support and didn't have to worry about your kids then. She's just out to make sure her kids get the most they can, and if you fall for this, your kids get screwed. You are not the idiot. It was fine keeping money for kids separate when it benefited her kids. Now that keeping money for kids separate doesn't benefit her kids, she wants to change things up. Huh. Your wife sounds like your soon-to-be second ex-wife. Between her threatening to tell her kids, manipulation much, and the clear resentment and jealousy over money, I don't think that your relationship can survive it. My nearly adult sister, 32, works in IT and has her dream job which allows her to travel quite a bit and work remotely as she pleases. But beyond that, she makes really good money and seems to take more PTO than she actually does work. She's not outright obnoxious with her money, but she's still annoying. She's constantly sending photos of her trips to the family group chat. This year alone, she's visited 5 states and 3 different countries, some for work, some for her working remotely, but some just for fun. She has designer bags, a nice car, and all her loans paid off. A great apartment with a jacuzzi tub. She's also a philanthropist and volunteer. Last week, she invited my parents and me to a charity dinner where she was to receive an award for being the biggest donor ever. On top of that, she fosters animals of said charity. So, You can imagine my parents are immensely proud of her. It's always looking at my beautiful, brilliant, philosophical, worldly, rich, compassionate daughter. And here's our youngest daughter. Yes, I am jealous of her. The other day, she took me to this expensive hibachi dinner. She told me she'd like to pay my college in full, with the caveat that I do part-time work study, be in a minimum of one club, and if I were to end up making $70,000 a year after graduation, I'd pay her back over 10 years with no interest. She'll forgive the debt entirely if I don't get a job that makes that much by the time I'm 50. I'd tell her that if she had all this money to flaunt around, why was she making me pay it back? It's stupid and selfish of her, and if she's gonna be like that, I don't even want her money. It's like, look at me. I have the money to pay for your college, but you don't get it unless you do what I want. And if you're successful, you have to pay me back. I ended up calling my parents for a ride home. She told them what happened, and they kept telling me that my sister was just trying to be generous and that I was acting like a spoiled brat. Am I the idiot for not accepting her handout? She spends money on herself, and it makes you mad. She spends money to help others, and it makes you mad. She offers you money. It makes you mad. Okay, you're the idiot, OP, and a jealous brat. Sister sounds like a legit saint. Would not have been surprised that the money OP paid back would end up in an account or a trust or investment vehicle for OP to use for their next big life event, buy a home, marriage, retirement, starting a family, kids' college fund, etc., any or whichever applied. Instead, she was offended by the thought that her sister would put any, in my opinion, reasonable stipulations on how her own money was being spent and dared to suggest that OP pay it back at a reasonable and penalty-free rate, but only if and when she's financially able to do so. Unbelievable. Just wait until OP sees the interest rates. Your sister's giving you the opportunity to go to college, but wants to make sure you don't waste the experience. Having a part-time job to spend money on and joining at least one club to make friends with a shared interest are for your benefit, not hers. You don't seem to realize how incredibly lucky you are. You're extremely ungrateful. Typical jealous, short-sighted, immature teen attitude. Have fun with that student debt instead. So, 25 male, recently became official with a lady I've been dating for 6 months. We decided to have the first barbecue of the nice summer weather in our area. We live separately currently. She decided to make steaks and baked potatoes, and I made some side salads, and I was also responsible for the drinks and chips. As my girlfriend got cooking, it just panned out that she ended up plating and serving to people as her steaks finished resting. When I went over to watch her plating, I noticed she had put butter and herbs and stuff all over the steaks. My family doesn't do this, and I've never seen it done this way. So, I asked her politely if she would put mine aside and I'd do my fixings. I just want my steak with ketchup. I'm pretty plain. Both she, her sister, and her dad gave me very pointed looks. Later that evening, she said she felt that it was rude to the chef, her in this instance, to ask for my food separately, and that she wished I would have just trusted her to make me a nice plate of food, and that I shouldn't do that when I'm a guest anywhere. I frequently ask for my food to be made differently or more plain when I'm a guest somewhere or at a restaurant, because I generally prefer plain food. I don't think this was rude. Am I the idiot for asking for my own food to be served differently outside of my own home? You're the idiot for putting ketchup on steak and calling it fixings. The proper thing to do was accept it as offered, eat some, and if you still want ketchup, then ask for it. You didn't even try it as offered. It may have been so fabulous that you didn't want ketchup. She was literally just flavoring the meat, and it wouldn't have hurt at all to just try it. It could have been leaps and bounds better than putting ketchup on it. Please, as an adult 25-year-old man, expand your palate. I promise things to taste better with seasoning and not just ketchup. Please. I will just say this once. Leave adults alone about their food preferences. I have 50 years of frustration at being looked down upon for being a picky eater when the taste of certain foods is just downright unpleasant to me. And yes, I've tried it. I promise. I've tried almost everything multiple times. It still tastes like crap. I cannot be more passionate about what I'm saying. People get to have their preferences, and as long as they don't expect others to go out of their way to accommodate them, they're fine. And no, asking his girlfriend to not put seasoning on it is not asking her to go out of her way. Not the idiot. That's a very odd reaction to a polite request. I call my kids boy, teen, and girl, mid-teen. I love The Simpsons, and I always thought it was funny that Homer referred to Bart as boy, and Bart called him Homer. With my father, everything was yes sir, no sir. I also constantly tell my kids I love and am proud of them. For some reason, the name thing puts a wild hair up my dad's butt. He was over last weekend, and he was vociferous about how I'm hurting his grandchildren by not calling them by their names. I told him that my kids were happy and to leave it alone. He just wouldn't drop it. So, I called my kids over to where we were talking, and I asked them if they wanted to be called by their names instead of boy and girl. I said in return, they would have to call me sir, not daddy or dad. I said I would accept father in emotional conversations, but I would no longer remind them every day that I loved and was proud of them. They both did. They were happy with the status quo. They know what my relationship with my father's like. My father got all angry and said that's not what he wanted at all. So, I asked him how often he told my sisters and me he loved us, or was proud of our accomplishments, or just his people. He said it was a different time, that his father was worse than him. So, I asked him if he thought my kids were happier than myself and my sisters growing up. I pointed out that my kids are happy. They're reasonably well-adjusted. Now he's being cranky, and my mom says he's upset that I think he was a bad father. He wasn't. He was just emotionally distant. I hated it. My sisters both had some therapy to help them choose better men. They both fell in love with any guy who gave them attention. My daughter knows her worth and won't settle for anything but the best. My son has no problem hugging me and telling me or his mom about his life. They're teens. I know I don't know everything that's going on with them, but I'm doing my best to be there and give them the support I never had. My kids know that they're loved. I don't just say it. I try my best to show it. My dad thinks I'm being an idiot for pointing out where he didn't do great as a father when he tried to criticize my parenting. You're the for telling your kids you'll call them by their names, but they have to call you sir, and you'll no longer tell them that you love them. That's extremely manipulating. Also, it's weird that you call your kids boy and girl and not their names. Also, you should seriously go talk to someone about the issues in your childhood and try to make peace with them. Yeah, I thought that was weird too. Idiot move for sure. I called my mom mom and dad dad, and they called me my name. Or idiot, but that was 1000% because of my doing as a late teen. OPs should have asked what they wanted to be called, and that's it. Major idiot for using their kids in a fight with the grandfather. Hopefully, this was a one-off thing because that simple exchange could make a lasting impression on them. Agreed. I do have an issue calling your children boy and girl in terms of names because it dehumanizes them and removes a key part of their identity, which is their name. Can you imagine going around at work and calling your boss woman or girl? You would immediately run into issues because people would find it extremely rude and won't allow it. But it's totally fine to do it to kids because they both don't know better and can't stand up for themselves yet. I, female 32, live with my partner and our 2 kids, ages toddler and preteen. My older sister Ava, 35, and her husband recently purchased a house locally. It's a super nice place with a big yard and, as you can probably guess from the title, a swimming pool. Ava recently hosted a barbecue at their place. It wasn't a huge event. She invited me, our parents, and our other siblings. She mentioned letting the kids play in the pool, so I only assumed my kids would be included. We're potty training, although my youngest is currently in diapers. At the barbecue, I was getting my youngest ready for the pool by changing him into a swim diaper. Ava pulled me aside and told me she doesn't think it's hygienic for my youngest to play in the pool since swim diapers don't hold pee. And she asked that he doesn't swim in the pool with the other kids playing in it. I didn't think this was fair and told Ava it would be no different at a public pool. So, what's the problem? She was really condescending and wouldn't listen to me at all and said that he can play in the pool when he's toilet trained and said it's not fair on the other kids. At this point, my son was crying because he wanted to swim in the pool and I told Ava she was being cold, but it's her house and her pool, so do what you want. Ava accused me of trying to guilt trip her and told me to just drop it. I was getting upset at this point, and I told our parents and other siblings about what Ava did. They told me it wasn't a big deal and that it wasn't worth arguing with her over it, and I should try not to let it bother me. I wasn't happy with this because this essentially meant that they were siding with her and downplaying how she treated me and my son. I left the barbecue early with my family because we didn't feel welcomed after that. The next day, Ava messaged me a whole paragraph and said that she was sorry that I was upset and that she wasn't trying to exclude my son for the sake of it. It was the super non-apology, and I told her I didn't want to hear it and that she's damaged her relationship with her nephew and she's not the one who had to deal with him being upset. Ava snapped at me out of nowhere and said I'm being dramatic. I told her to grow up and said that I had a very valid reason to be mad and that she needed to stop acting like a teenager. Ava showed these messages to everyone and everything was just a bit up in the air. I feel like I'm right here, but the rest of my family doesn't seem to agree. You are the idiot. I told Ava it would be no different at a public pool. So, what's the problem? But this isn't a public pool. It's her private pool at her house, and if she wants to set a rule, she should be able to make that call without being argued at, and she didn't damage any relationship with your kid. They're a toddler. They'll forget and get over this. OP. Ultimately, you're continuing to escalate this situation. You can explain to your son that the pool is for potty-trained kids. You must accept that your sister doesn't want kids who aren't potty-trained in her pool, which is absolutely okay, and you need to get over it instead of holding on to it. I disagree. Everyone's the idiot here. She should have told you beforehand that only potty-trained kids were allowed in the pool. Of course, your kids would want to swim, and of course, you didn't think it would be an issue. She should have given you a heads up so you could have prepared. Sister was cruel to wait until the point that the poor child was already fitted out in his swim clothes to hear then that he